Welcome back, history explorers. If you're joining us again, thank you for being part of this journey. We truly appreciate your support. And if this is your very first time here, a big warm welcome to you. You've just discovered one of the most fascinating history channels on YouTube, where we dive deep into ancient civilizations, epic battles, and timeless legends. Today, we continue our incredible series, The Story of Crete, the Mysterious Island, an epic look at one of the most influential and legendary places in history, from the dawn of the Minoans to Crete's role in World War II, and its vibrant culture today. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below so we can see just how global our community is. Now, let's travel together back through time. To the myths, mysteries, and enduring spirit of Crete. Chapter 1, The Birth of an Island. How Nature, Myth, and the First Settlers Shaped Crete. Episode 1, Geological Birth of Crete, Mountains Rising, Earthquakes, Volcanoes. Crete's story begins deep beneath the sea, in the collision of continents. Millions of years ago, the African tectonic plate thrust upward against the European plate, creating violent earthquakes and fiery volcanic eruptions. The seabed cracked, spewing molten rock that hardened into mountains. Slowly, the sea retreated from the highest ridges, exposing what would become the island of Crete. Its jagged peaks, Ida, Dicte, and Lefka Ori, rose like the spines of a great beast. Even today, Crete trembles with the memory of its volcanic birth. Where earthquakes and shifting land remind its people that their island is alive, forged by fire and sea. Episode 2, Early Flora and Fauna unique to Crete. Once the land had formed, life claimed it. Winds and waves carried seeds from distant shores, while birds brought new plants and creatures. Over thousands of years, Crete became a world apart. Strange and unique species thrived here. Tiny elephants and dwarf hippopotamuses roamed valleys, while wild goats known as Cree bounded along rocky cliffs. The mountains gave shelter to vultures with wingspans as wide as a man is tall, while the forests held aromatic herbs, olive trees, and grapevines. Crete was a natural laboratory of evolution, shaping animals and plants into forms not seen anywhere else. This island of contrasts, snowy peaks, fertile plains, and sun-baked coasts, became a living jewel in the Mediterranean. Episode 3, First Neolithic Settlers, 700 BC. Around 700 BC, the first humans set foot on Crete. They came from Anatolia and mainland Greece, braving the sea in simple wooden boats. They carried with them the knowledge of farming, their animals, and the seeds of a new life. These Neolithic settlers built small stone and mud houses, cleared forests for fields, and established the first permanent communities. They brought goats, sheep, and pigs, transforming Crete from wilderness into farmland. For the first time, the island echoed with the sounds of human voices, the crackle of fires, and the rhythm of agricultural life. From this fragile beginning, Crete began its human story. Episode 4, Introduction of Farming Pottery. The settlers of Crete not only survived, they innovated. Farming became their foundation. Wheat and barley were cultivated, olives and figs were nurtured, and grapevines began to grow across the hills. With farming came pottery. Clay from riverbeds was shaped, smoothed, and fired into durable vessels. These pots stored food, carried water, and became tools of trade. Over time, the pottery evolved from plain designs into decorated art, marking the first signs of culture. Farming anchored their survival, but pottery preserved their memory. Each vessel was a silent witness to a people who were slowly building something greater than survival, a civilization. Episode 5. Stone Tools and Fishing Culture. Life on an island demanded ingenuity. With no metals yet in use, Cretans sharpened stone into blades, axes, and fishing hooks. Fishing became a cornerstone of survival. The surrounding seas were rich with tuna, mackerel, and octopus. Nets were woven from plant fibers, and boats carved from hollowed logs skimmed across the waves. Families gathered on the shores to dry fish in the sun, ensuring food for leaner months. The tools of stone and the bounty of the sea gave Crete resilience, binding the islanders to both the mountains and the ocean. Theirs was a culture shaped equally by land and water. Episode 6. First villages and trade routes. From scattered huts, villages began to emerge. Clusters of stone dwellings formed in fertile valleys and along sheltered coasts. The first signs of trade appeared as villagers exchanged food, pottery, and tools with neighboring settlements. But Crete's isolation would not last long. Early sailors discovered that the island lay at the crossroads of the Mediterranean. Obsidian from Anatolia, copper from Cyprus, and exotic shells from Africa began to flow into Crete. In return, the island exported olive oil, grain, and finely made pottery. Crete was no longer a lonely outpost, it was becoming a node in a growing network of exchange. Episode 7. Myth of Zeus' birthplace, Mount Ida Cave. Myth and history began to intertwine. To the ancient Greeks, Crete was no ordinary island, it was sacred. They told that Zeus, king of the gods, was born in a cave on Mount Ida, hidden from his father Cronus who devoured his children. The infant Zeus was nourished by the goat Amalthea, while warriors clashed their shields to conceal his cries. Whether legend or memory, the cave at Mount Ida became a place of pilgrimage. It symbolized Crete not just as land, but as the very womb of divinity, a place where gods themselves began their journey. Episode 8. Sacred Cave Shrines. Crete's caves became holy sanctuaries. Deep within their chambers, offerings were left, figurines of animals, jars of honey, and bones of sacrificed goats. These sacred places connected the people to the divine, blending survival with spirituality. Mountains and caves were seen as portals to the gods, where the earth itself breathed with sacred power. Shrines appeared not just in caves but also on mountain peaks and fertile plains. This reverence for nature became a defining mark of Cretan belief. The divine was not distant, but present, in the mountains, in the earth, and in the very breath of the island. Episode 9. Connection to early Mediterranean trade. By the 3rd millennium BC, Crete was firmly woven into the fabric of the Mediterranean. Its people sailed to Egypt, Anatolia, and Cyprus, exchanging their surplus for exotic goods. From the Nile came gold, ivory, and lapis lazuli. From Cyprus came copper, the key to bronze. In return, Crete offered olive oil, wine, and ceramics. These exchanges carried not just goods but ideas, art, technology, and beliefs flowed between cultures. Crete, once remote, became a bridge between worlds, setting the stage for its role as the beating heart of early Mediterranean civilization. Episode 10: Foundations of Europe's First Civilization. By 3000 BC, the transformation was complete. The Neolithic settlers of Crete had built villages, harnessed farming, mastered trade, and created traditions of myth and worship. From these foundations would rise the first true civilization of Europe, the Minoans. Their palaces, art, and seafaring power would dominate the Aegean for centuries. But the roots of that greatness were here, in the birth of an island shaped by fire, blessed by nature, and guided by the dreams of its earliest people. Crete was not just another island. It was the beginning of civilization itself. Chapter 2: Rise of the Minoans, the dawn of Europe's first civilization. The Palace Builders. Episode 1: Knossos, Phaistos, Malia, Zakros construction. Around 2000 BC, Crete entered a new age of grandeur. From scattered villages, monumental palaces began to rise. Knossos, the largest, stretched across a sprawling hill, its walls built of gleaming gypsum and limestone. Phaistos overlooked the fertile Mazara plain, while Malia guarded the northern coast, and Zakros controlled the eastern harbors. These were not castles for kings alone, but vast centers of administration, trade, and ceremony. Courtyards opened into labyrinthine halls, staircases climbed to terraces, and storerooms ran deep beneath the earth. Together, these palaces transformed Crete into the heartbeat of a new civilization, the Minoans. Episode 2: Multi-story architecture and plumbing. The Minoan palaces were marvels of engineering centuries ahead of their time. Their builders created multi-story complexes with light wells, grand staircases, and open-air courtyards. Most remarkable of all was their plumbing system. Stone aqueducts carried fresh mountain water into the palaces, while terracotta pipes drained waste away. Toilets with flushing mechanisms and bathtubs carved from stone gave Minoan nobles a luxury unknown elsewhere in the ancient world. These advances made the palaces not just centers of power, but showcases of comfort and innovation. Setting Crete apart as a beacon of progress in the Bronze Age. Episode 3: Storage rooms for olive oil and wine. Deep within the palaces lay endless rows of storage rooms, their floors lined with massive clay jars called pithoi. These jars, taller than a man, held the lifeblood of the Minoan economy, olive oil and wine. Oil-fueled lamps fed families, and became Crete's greatest export, while wine flowed through feasts and trade routes alike. In the flickering torchlight of these storerooms, the wealth of an entire island was preserved. Each Phaistos stood as both a container and a symbol of abundance, proving that Crete had mastered the art of production, storage, and commerce on a scale unseen in Europe before. Episode 4: Artistic frescoes of daily life. The walls of Minoan palaces bloomed with color. Frescoes, painted in vibrant reds, blues, and golds, depicted scenes of daily life and celebration. Dolphins swam across dining halls, while lilies and crocuses decorated chambers with eternal spring. Farmers, fishermen, and dancers were immortalized in paint, showing a society that embraced both nature and joy. Unlike other ancient cultures that celebrated war, Minoan art rarely showed battle. Instead, it revealed a people in harmony with the sea, the land, and each other. These frescoes were not just decoration, they were windows into the spirit of the Minoans. Episode 5, Role of Priestesses in Minoan Religion. At the heart of Minoan spirituality stood women. Priestesses, draped in flowing robes, presided over ceremonies in palaces, caves, and mountain shrines. They offered libations of wine, led dances in sacred courtyards, and lifted their arms to the mother goddess, the central figure of Minoan faith. Snakes, symbols of rebirth and protection, coiled around their hands, while doves perched on their altars. In Minoan religion, the divine feminine reigned supreme, shaping a society where women held both spiritual and social influence unmatched in the ancient Mediterranean. Episode 6. Advanced Metallurgy and Tools. The Minoans were not only artists and builders but also master craftsmen of metal. Copper from Cyprus and tin from distant lands were smelted into bronze, giving rise to stronger tools and weapons. Minoan smiths fashioned chisels, swords, and plowshares with precision, fueling both agriculture and defense. Gold and silver were worked into jewelry of astonishing detail, worn by nobles and traded across the seas. Metallurgy elevated Minoan society, turning raw resources into instruments of power, beauty, and survival. It was through these tools that Crete advanced into the Bronze Age with unmatched skill. Episode 7. Bull-leaping Rituals. Perhaps the most iconic of Minoan traditions was the bull-leaping ritual. In palace courtyards, young men and women faced massive bulls head-on. With daring acrobatics, they grasped the horns, vaulted into the air, and landed gracefully on the animal's back before dismounting. This ritual was more than spectacle, it symbolized strength, agility, and communion with the sacred bull, a creature tied to fertility and power. The bull would later inspire Greek myths of the Minotaur. But in Minoan times, it was an emblem of courage and the eternal dance between human and nature. Episode 8. Minoan Fleet and Naval Dominance. Surrounded by sea, the Minoans became its masters. Their sleek, swift ships with high prows and rows of oars cut across the Mediterranean, linking Crete to every coast. The Minoan fleet was more than commerce, it was power. Their ships carried goods, soldiers, and influence, securing trade routes and protecting Crete from invasion. Some historians believe the Minoans created the first true thalassocracy, an empire of the sea. Wherever their sails appeared, so too did Minoan culture, spreading their influence from Egypt to mainland Greece. And far beyond. Episode 9. Women in Power in Minoan Society. Unlike most ancient societies, Minoan women held visible power. They were priestesses, administrators, and perhaps even rulers. Frescoes show them leading processions, standing on balconies, and presiding over rituals. Their clothing, layered skirts, tight bodices, and elaborate jewelry, signified status and authority. In Minoan art, women appear larger than men, commanding respect and reverence. This prominence of women, combined with their central role in religion, reveals a society where gender balance was woven into the fabric of daily life. Crete was unique not only for its palaces, but also for its social order. Episode 10. Crete as the Mediterranean's first superpower. By the height of the second millennium BC, Crete was unrivaled. Its palaces, art, and ships made it the jewel of the Aegean. Its wealth flowed from agriculture, trade, and naval strength, while its culture spread across seas and into legend. The Minoans had built not just cities, but the first great civilization of Europe. From Knossos to Zakros, their influence stretched across the Mediterranean, marking Crete as the region's first true superpower. Yet even at their peak, shadows loomed on the horizon. The glory of the Minoans would one day face trials as fierce as the sea that had given them power. Chapter 3: Myths, Gods, and Monsters, where myth and history meet. Zeus and the Sacred Caves. Episode 1. Birth of Zeus in Idaean Cave. High on Mount Ida, the sacred heart of Crete, lies a cavern said to be the birthplace of Zeus, king of the gods. According to myth, Rhea, fleeing her husband Cronus who devoured their children, found refuge in this cave. Here, she gave birth to Zeus, who would one day overthrow Cronus and rule Olympus. For the people of Crete, this cave was not just legend, it was a sacred site, a womb of divinity carved into stone, visited by pilgrims for centuries. Episode 2. Nymphs nurturing Zeus. The myths tell that Zeus was nurtured by nymphs in the sacred cave. The nymph Amalthea fed him on the milk of a divine goat, while bees brought him honey, the food of immortals. Crete's myths tied nature to the divine, gods sustained by animals, forests, and earth's abundance. This intimate bond between divinity and nature reflected the Minoan worldview, where mountains, caves, and groves were living sanctuaries of the sacred. Episode 3. The Curetes drumming to hide baby Zeus cries, to keep Zeus hidden from Cronus. The Curetes, warrior guardians, performed a ritual of noise and rhythm. They clashed their bronze shields and danced around the cave, their thunderous drumming drowning the cries of the infant god. This tradition of ecstatic dance and ritual drumming lived on in Cretan culture, echoing through later festivals and rites. The Curetes embodied both protection and devotion, warriors who safeguarded the future of Olympus. Episode 4. Transformation of myth into cult worship. What began as myth grew into cult practice. By the classical era, Zeus's birth cave became a pilgrimage site. Offerings of bronze weapons, figurines, and ceramics were left at its entrance. These were not just tributes to myth but expressions of devotion to a living god. Archaeologists have uncovered altars, libation tables, and votive objects, showing that myth had been woven into daily worship. In Crete, gods were not distant, they lived in mountains, caves, and the hearts of worshippers. Episode 5. Daedalus King Minos. Legend tells of Daedalus, the brilliant craftsman, who came to Crete under King Minos. Daedalus built wonders that blurred the line between engineering and magic, mechanical statues, flying machines, and most famously, the labyrinth. King Minos, son of Zeus and Europa, ruled from Knossos, embodying both divine lineage and earthly power. The partnership of Daedalus and Minos symbolized Crete's dual nature, a land of innovation and myth. Fact and fable entwined. Episode 6. The labyrinth as Knossos itself. The labyrinth, home of the Minotaur, has long captured the imagination. Some scholars argue the myth arose from the palace of Knossos itself, a vast complex with over 1,000 rooms, staircases, and corridors twisting like a maze. To outsiders, the palace must have seemed a living labyrinth, where one could wander endlessly through its painted halls. The myth, then, was a story born from stone, turning architecture into legend. Episode 7. The Minotaur's origin. Myth versus reality. The Minotaur, half man, half bull, was said to be the child of Pasiphae, wife of Minos, cursed to love a sacred bull. While the tale speaks of monstrosity, archaeologists see echoes of ritual bull worship, To the Minoans, the bull was a symbol of fertility and cosmic power. The Minotaur myth may have been a distorted memory of bull rituals, transformed into a story of terror by later Greeks. The creature became a metaphor, an untamed force locked in a maze of human fear and divinity. Episode 8: Theseus and Ariadne. The story continues with Theseus, the Athenian hero sent to Crete to slay the Minotaur. In Knossos, he met Ariadne, daughter of Minos, who fell in love with him. She gave him the key to survival, the golden thread to guide him out of the labyrinth. Their tale is one of courage, betrayal, and love entwined with Crete's myths. It reflected the tensions between Crete and Athens, where myth became political history disguised as legend. Episode 9: The Golden Thread Escape. The golden thread became a symbol of guidance through darkness. As Theseus fought the Minotaur, Ariadne's thread led him back to freedom. This myth captured deeper truths, the human struggle against chaos, and the need for wisdom and guidance to overcome life's trials. In later traditions, the golden thread was invoked as a symbol of knowledge, love, and salvation, a legacy of Crete's myths carried into philosophy and poetry. Episode 10: Symbolism of Bull Worship in Minoan Culture. At the heart of these myths lies the bull, sacred, powerful, and eternal. Bull leaping, bull horns carved on palace walls, and countless figurines reveal its importance. The bull embodied strength, fertility, and divine connection, shaping both ritual and myth. Later Greek stories of Minos, the Minotaur, and Theseus were echoes of this ancient reverence. For the Minoans, the bull was not a monster but a bridge between human and God, earth and sky. The myths were stories, but the symbolism was real, rooted in the very fabric of Minoan life. Chapter 4: Disaster and Collapse. The Fall of the Minoans. The Thera Eruption, Episode 1, Warning Signs of Eruption. The island of Thera, now known as Santorini, was a sleeping giant. For centuries, it had shown signs of unrest, rumbling beneath the surface, smoke rising faintly, the earth trembling beneath the feet of fishermen and farmers. The Minoans, deeply spiritual people, interpreted these tremors as messages from the gods. But in truth, nature was preparing to unleash one of the greatest catastrophes the ancient world had ever seen. Geological studies show that in the years before the eruption, small quakes shook the Aegean basin. Springs boiled, gases seeped from the ground, and animals fled the island. Yet, despite these warnings, life on Crete and Thera continued. The Minoans, secure in their power, could not imagine their empire being undone by the very land beneath their feet. Episode 2: Earthquakes shaking Knossos. The first blow struck Crete itself. Powerful earthquakes radiated from the volcanic core of Thera, shaking Knossos, Phaistos, and Malia. Palaces that once stood as symbols of wealth and ingenuity cracked and tumbled. Storerooms collapsed, spilling amphorae of olive oil and wine into the rubble. Survivors dug frantically to rescue family members. The frescoes of dolphins, lilies, and dancers, artworks of vibrant life, were shattered into fragments. To the Minoans, earthquakes were not random, they were divine punishments, signs of anger from gods like Poseidon, lord of the sea and earthquakes. Episode 3: Explosion of Thera Volcano. And then, it happened, the cataclysm. Around 1600 BC, Thera erupted with a force so immense it dwarfed nearly every volcanic event in human history. The sky turned white-hot, fireballs shot into the heavens, and the island was ripped apart in a thunderous explosion. Ash and pumice rained down across the sea, covering ships, choking animals, and blotting out the sun. For the people of Crete, it must have seemed like the end of the world. Modern science tells us the blast released energy equal to hundreds of atomic bombs. Entire towns on Thera were buried instantly. Episode 4. Tsunami striking Crete. From the sea came the second wave of destruction. The eruption unleashed colossal tsunamis, waves higher than palaces, racing across the Aegean. They slammed into northern Crete, wiping out ports, ships, and coastal villages. Fishing fleets were shattered. Warehouses of goods were dragged into the sea. The once mighty Minoan navy, the pride of the Mediterranean, was annihilated in a single day. Without its fleet, Crete's dominance was doomed. Episode 5. Ash cloud covering skies. For weeks, perhaps months, the skies remained dark. Ash blanketed Crete, falling like black snow. The sun became a faint glow behind clouds of sulfur. Crops withered without light, animals starved, and water sources became poisoned with volcanic debris. This was not just a disaster, it was an apocalypse. Minoans who once painted their walls with flowers and sea creatures now faced only ash and silence. Episode 6. Crops destroyed in famine. The agricultural heart of Crete, its olive groves, vineyards, and wheat fields, was destroyed. With no harvest, famine set in. Families abandoned villages, searching for food inland. Children cried from hunger, and once bustling markets stood empty. The Minoan system, so dependent on surplus trade, began to unravel. Without olive oil and grain to export, their economic lifeline was cut. Episode 7. Survivors fleeing coasts. As famine deepened and the sea remained unpredictable, survivors fled the coasts. They moved inland, abandoning ports and fishing villages. Crete's population shifted into the mountains, where small communities clung to survival. The great palaces, once symbols of power, were left half-ruined, their grandeur a haunting reminder of better times. Episode 8. Theories linking Atlantis myth. For centuries, philosophers and storytellers whispered of Atlantis, the mighty island swallowed by the sea. Many scholars today link the story to Thera's eruption and the collapse of the Minoans. Could Plato's tale be a memory of this catastrophe, passed down through generations? The parallels are striking. A rich island, advanced in culture, undone by divine punishment and disaster. Episode 9. Mycenaean takeover. With Crete weakened, a new power emerged, the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece. Warriors and traders, they filled the vacuum left by Minoan decline. They took over palaces, imposed their language, linear B, and reshaped Crete into a new order. The age of peace and artistry ended. In its place came an age of fortresses, warriors, and kings. Episode 10. End of Minoan dominance. By 1400 BC, the Minoans, Europe's first great civilization, were no longer the masters of the Mediterranean. Their palaces lay in ruins, their fleets sunk, their myths remembered more than their power, but their legacy endured. The Minoans left behind stories of gods, monsters, and labyrinths. They shaped Greek culture, which in turn shaped Rome, and the Western world. Though their empire collapsed, their spirit echoes through time. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of the story of Crete, the mysterious island. We've only just begun this incredible journey, exploring the rise of the Minoans and the foundations of Europe's very first civilization. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Crete's history, don't forget to hit that subscribe button bell and turn on notifications, because part 2, covering chapters 6 to 10, is coming very soon, and you won't want to miss it. Once again, thank you for being part of this amazing community. Your support means everything, and together, we'll keep uncovering the secrets of the past. See you in part 2.